Welcome to the SIWIKE podcast, the only podcast that shares the stuff you didn't know you needed to know about jobs, careers, and life. The SIWIKE podcast, the stuff I wish I knew earlier.
Hi, everyone, and welcome to the SIWIKE Stuff I Wish I Knew Earlier podcast. We're here again with our guest mentor, Ellie, and we thought we'd do something a little bit different where we wanted to combine a few topics together and chunk them up into little kind of minisodes is what we're calling them. So we wanted to be under the broader topic of kind of the Odyssey. So for the folks that are aware, they've started adding some new life stages after kind of childhood, teenage years, and before you get to the adult stage, they've added this Odyssey type time stage where a lot of people are figuring things out. And we thought we'd get into three major topics. We'd get into learning how to self-advocate. We were going to get into dealing with adversity. And the last one is just adulting, right, in general. So we thought we'd kind of break it down into those three topics. The third episode, or the minisode of adulting. So talking about becoming an adult because folks have graduated, and generally speaking, when you're 18, you're considered an adult, right? At least in the eyes of the law, right? But there are different types where you're kind of that legal adult at 18, and then when you kind of move out of the house and you're more independent, you're a functional adult in the sense that you can kind of pay your taxes and have a driver's license, book your own dentist appointments and stuff like that. But then the kind of top level is the emotional adult, where you're able to deal with adversity and all of the other things that we talked about, and you're really that top of the adult chain, where you're not just functioning properly and going through the motions, you're actually able to help others in the process. So talk to us a little bit about kind of your adulting journey and some of the milestones that you went along the way.
Yeah, adulting is such a, I mean, I haven't mastered adulting yet by any stretch of the imagination. But just to note, yeah, exactly. Just to note to, especially all the younger folks who are thinking that adulting is scary. Truly and honestly, nobody has got it perfect, and everybody's still stumbling and fumbling their way through what we call adulthood. A lot of us are just pretending to be functional adults, but we're all still learning. And so all that is to say is that, you know, my journey through what I've been calling adulting is, I'd really reflect on what I've learned. I won't talk about so much what I've done, because what you do or what you're able to accomplish depends on so many variables, mostly dealing with your parents and where you're born, where you grew up, what kind of family you grew up in. But the type of adulting that you have a little bit more control over is things like your self-awareness, understanding your own goals, understanding what motivates you, understanding what lights a fire inside your soul and what makes you passionate about your career, understanding what you want to learn. That to me is actually like becoming an adult, or one of the really important parts to me. So when I think about adulting, I think about being a teenager and starting to get my first job at the age of 15. That was one of my early forays into adulting, because I had responsibilities at my job.
Right.
So definitely encouraging all young folks out there to start volunteering, get a job when you're younger. It will help you with adulting so much. Then moving through university, adulting became things like having to plan my own schedules out, having to, apply for jobs, like co-op jobs, and having to think about planning my food more vigorously, because I was studying at university for so many hours every day.
Right.
Adulting as I am now, I just turned 25. Adulting for me is thinking about how much money am I going to spend on stuff? Because there's a difference between buying things that you want and buying things that you need.
Yeah.
And also, again, like acting in a way that's aligned with my personal values and seeking professional development opportunities that are aligned with what I truly want to do, and not just chasing things for a salary or for a paycheck.
Yeah. I think what speaks to me about what you said is for those that are on the younger end is to kind of ease your way into it instead of kind of diving into the deep end, to use like a swimming analogy. But if you had to basically had your life taken care of you, where your parents are really doing everything for you, and then you graduate and suddenly you're on your own, you have to pay rent, you have to get a job, you have to cook, you have to do blah 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 blah, and you're suddenly thrown into the deep end of adulting. That's not a great thing to do, right? Versus, well, get a job or volunteer when you're a little bit younger, even in high school, even younger if you can manage, and then maybe start volunteering and help cooking, right? Something simple around the house and cleaning, and well, you probably won't be able to pay taxes and bills at that point in time, but maybe start saving, that sort of thing. A little kind of youth account, that sort of thing. They often have those, and kind of understanding what goes into growing up, and then that'll allow you to focus on some of the bigger picture stuff. So as you said, like your purpose, and figuring out like, can I do something? Can I find a job? Can I find a career that fulfills me? Or is it just a hobby that I do on the side, or is there something else? And then you get into kind of growing up, and if you go the path of starting a family, how do you kind of share those values with your children, or your friends, or whoever around you as well? So a lot of different things there. What are some of the life lessons that you learn along the way, and some of the learnings that you might want to take or share with folks to help ease them into the kind of adulting stages that come later on?
Yeah. Wow. Big question to ask a 25-year-old. When I was 17, I wish I knew that graduating high school and going into post-secondary education does not mean that I'm like picking my career.
Sure.
I wish, so I went into sciences. I studied biology at University of Toronto, because I just didn't really know what other career paths existed.
Mm-hmm.
I thought I was going to be like a researcher, a professor. I'm not, slash. And so I'd say the biggest lesson that I wish I learned earlier was to explore what really interested me at that age. And then furthermore, as I got older, to sit in the discomfort of not knowing.
Right.
I didn't really know what career I would end up in when I was going through undergrad. I didn't even know that like the job that I have exists. I truly did not. And so being able to sit with that discomfort, but moreover, understanding what lights the fire inside of you. If you love working with people, working in a team, like take mental note of that. If you're really good at like analytical problem solving, if you make spreadsheets for fun, like if you've been tracking the COVID data and like analyzing the data on your like by yourself for fun, like take note of that and actually pursue a career or a post-secondary education that has to do with that. So understanding yourself and reflecting on it is very, very, very helpful.
Yeah, and I think what speaks to me on that side is a lot of folks, when they're younger and they've graduated, they want to find their passion and work through their passion and follow it and whatever. And I actually say that, well, I don't think people follow their passion so much as they create their passion. And what I mean by that is, like, you don't just wake up and have this thought exercise and, oh yeah, I'm suddenly passionate about data. I'm suddenly passionate about this. I'm suddenly passionate about whatever. Usually it's a bit of a build up to that, where it starts off with a bit of curiosity. Oh, I'm wondering, like, what is this data? What can I get out of it? What can I do with it? And what sort of insights can I gather? And from that curiosity, you spend some time with it, right? You play around with the data, and then it becomes interesting. And that curiosity develops into an interest, and then an interest hopefully turns into an excitement, and then that excitement turns into a passion, right? So it's a bit of an evolution there, where that might be over months, weeks, years, right? Or it could be overnight in a sense, but it does take some time, where it's hard to be passionate about something that you just picked up yesterday, right? Although you can have that true excitement and interest in it, and then when you do it over a sustained amount of time, that often becomes kind of that passion. So I think that's a great insight for folks to kind of consider in order to become that adult, because oftentimes that's one thing where, in all honesty, most adults don't even have, where they're working and they're operating in that kind of functional adult capacity, where they're living, they're surviving, but they're not thriving as most people would want to be doing.
Yeah. To put what you said in a nutshell, would you agree that you're saying you don't have to have it figured out all at once, all at the beginning?
Absolutely. So it's one of those things where in generations before, you needed to have some stuff figured out. And the thing is, you would make a bit of a commitment that you would work in that career path for the next 40 years or whatever, and people were okay with that, right? So in those days, your high school choice on what degree to go to and what career path to go down was semi-permanent, but or at least that was the norm, right? Nowadays, right, people are hopping careers all the time. So if I take myself as a case in point, I mean, I did computer science, and then I went into more the business side, and now I guess I'm in education, and I still have a good 2 or 3 decades left, depending on how long I continue working, right? And will I continue to do that, or maybe I'll pick up cooking and become a chef or whatever, or maybe go into pharmaceuticals or whatever, right? So I have no idea, and it's one where even nowadays with things like the gig economy, right? People are doing multiple things at the same time. So it's not even one thing after the other. It's just, they have a whole bunch of different disciplines that they're undertaking from 9 to 5 in the morning, and then evenings they moonlight as something else, and they'll do that for the summer, and they do something different in the winter, right? So it's an amazing time to be living where there's so many more opportunities. And the interesting thing on that is what you'll end up doing in 5 years, 10 years. There's a lot of stats there where a lot of those jobs haven't even been invented yet, created yet. Yep. So you might not even know. So to be able to predict and even to commit yourself to doing that for the next 20, 40 years seems a little bit short-sighted in that you're not taking a look at all the potential opportunities. So definitely take that. And one thing that I encourage students and youth to do is become lifelong learners, right? Just because you graduated doesn't mean you stop learning, right? To always pick up some new skills, and whether it's on the job, whether it's something on the side, just being interested in something and advancing yourself, I think would be a very useful thing to incorporate into your daily routine, weekly routine, or whatever, because that will help kind of future-proof yourself for any careers upcoming, and just have a better life in general.
Yeah, I'd love to reflect on what you were speaking about just before you ended off on the last topic, where you were talking about different jobs and how different jobs will and will not exist in the future. And to translate that into practical advice for students who are thinking about like what do I study, or like what do I do as a career? Like, you don't need to think about a specific job title because, like you said, Luki, to your point, it will probably not exist.
Sure.
And so the practical advice there is, like, in everything that you do, try to pick out the things that were the most interesting to you, because that will help you try to find your path a little bit more. For example, for me, my first job was I was a cashier at a grocery store, and I thought that I hated it. And for the most part, I did. Like, it was tough, like being on your feet for a whole shift and like having to just like scan groceries all the time. It was like hard work. But what I reflected on and realized much later, what I actually liked to do within that job was to help people. I really found it satisfying when people thanked me for helping them with their groceries. And so the advice for students is, like, whatever you do, even if you hate your crappy part-time job, that's okay. But think about at least that 1 or 2 things that you like within that job. Do you love working with your coworkers in a team? Like, take that and figure out how you can apply that to what you might want to study or do as a career. So you don't have to think about a specific job title. Just pick out things from what you're currently doing that really light that fire inside of you.
Yeah, and one of the recommendations I often have for folks is to pick off what you said before about kind of journaling and apply it to this context where I use what I call the 5-2-2-1 journaling method, where basically 5 minutes, 2 minutes journaling on things that drained you, those things that you'd rather not continue doing again, and then 2 minutes on what excited you, what energized you, what lit you up during the day. And then the last 1 minute thinking about, well, how can you minimize the first and maximize the second. And then ideally over the course of a week, a month, a year, then you start noticing patterns, right? And those patterns are ideally the future job or career path that you're going to look into and be able to develop into kind of a very fruitful and meaningful career. So definitely one where you can take the time to reflect. And it's one where there's all sorts of folks where they talk about like success in terms of like money and titles and stuff like that. Well, you want to figure out whether or not that applies for you, right? And if that's something that you need to undertake, where you need the big fancy title and the corner office and what have you, or would you rather be doing something that lights you up on a day-to-day basis, right? So those are just some other considerations. So, well, thanks so much for talking a little bit about kind of the Odyssey, and we'll kind of I believe we gave some useful insights for folks that are going through that adulting phase and going through that Odyssey in general. And hopefully folks will be able to reflect and apply to themselves, and as well have a little bit of forewarning for those that are yet to encounter this, that there will be some adversity that's coming, and you will need to learn to self-advocate as you kind of grow up and get into that adulting world as well. So are there any kind of words of wisdom that you'd want to leave folks with as we kind of conclude this mini-sode?
Yeah, thank you. I love that you tied together the three things. Like, you can't really start to master adulting unless you learn more about self-advocacy. And in order for you to, deal with adversity, part of that is also self-advocacy. In terms of words of wisdom for folks, you learn so much by talking to other people. You and I could have a whole episode on the value of networking.
Mm-hmm.
We could go on forever about that, but really talking to other people who are doing jobs that seem cool, and like asking them questions, or talking to a guidance counselor or an academic advisor in high school or university and saying, look, I'm really interested in this. Like, what can I do with that?
Mm-hmm.
Talking to people through these thoughts that you have about adversity, or some questions that you have about how to set boundaries. Talking to people will always give you more insights than just keeping it all in your head.
For sure. And I think taking some time throughout the years and throughout your career to check in on yourself, because that decision that you made when you were 17, 18, right? And that subsequent decision that you made when you're 22 might not resonate when you're 25 or 35 and that sort of thing, because life changes and you change as well, and circumstances change. So if you can kind of just redirect yourself or kind of recalibrate yourself, I think that would be a useful thing. And changing is okay, right? Being able to do something different is not a bad thing as well, and probably makes for a very fruitful career and an interesting life. So thanks so much, Ellie, for joining us in the conversation, and hopefully we'll have you back for future episodes to talk about more things in careers and life.
Thank you, Luki.
Thanks for joining us on the SIWIKE Stuff I Wish I Knew Earlier, the podcast. If you like the podcast, please subscribe on iTunes, Stitcher, or wherever you found this podcast. And if you can give us a review, that would be very appreciated. Feel free to contact me on LinkedIn at LukiDanu, LukiDanu, and the same on most social media platforms. And I look forward to hearing from you. Thanks. Bye.